Sports Science Dudes. I'm your host, Dr. Jose Antonio, with my inimitable co-host, Dr. Tony Ricci. Today we have two special guests, but before I introduce them, if you don't subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Also, we are on Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube. So if you listen to one of those three, you can find the Sports Science Dudes. Our first guest, Wendi Irlbeck. She is an MSRDN LD CISSN. She's a registered dietitian, certified sports nutritionist, and lifestyle coach with a master's degree in nutrition. Wendi specializes in enhancing health, athletic performance with a focus on injury prevention by improving metabolic efficiency using nutrient periodization. She and her team of registered dietitians work closely with both young and adult athletes nationwide, and we're going to focus on young athletes today. Wendi's a former collegiate athlete, active writer, speaker. She's a great speaker, by the way. Mentor, and actively integrates her faith into her practice. She's based in Nashville, Tennessee. Yes, she finally moved from that god-awful state. We won't talk about it. You can check her out. Check her website at www.nutritionwithwendi.com. That is nutritionwithwendi.com. Also, she's easy to follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So Wendi's a great resource. Make sure you follow her. And then our other guest, who I've known since, George Bush 1 was president, or maybe even Ronald Reagan. I don't even know, Mike. It's been a long time. So
85, Joey?
It's Ronald Reagan.
The Reagan administration.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of crazy. But Mike Nitka, he has a MS degree, and he earned his Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Health and Physical Education from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. I've actually been on that campus. And he began teaching at Muskego High School in Southeast Wisconsin for 38 years.
Wow, nice.
He had a vision to create elective PE classes, which were called Human Performance 1 and 2, and then expanded the weight room several times to meet the demands. He's got actually quite a history. He joined the NSCA in 1985, and he earned the following credentials starting in 1988. He was a CSCS with distinction, but also what's really cool is he's in the Hall of Fame of the NSCA. That was in 2018. And then he got the NSCA Boyd Epley Lifetime Achievement Award in 2022.
Very nice.
Yeah. Mike and I go back and forth about how much he loves living in cold weather, and I send him pictures of me paddling every now and then. But he's quite the resource, actually, for his experience training young kids, adolescents, and I'm sure he gets a lot of the same questions I get, Wendi gets, and Tony gets about youth training. So welcome to the Sports Science Dudes. By the end of the show, you both will be Sports Science Dudes. Well, Wendi will be a dudette.
Thank you. Biology matters. Biology matters. Just
We're with you on that. So first, I want to start with Wendi. Working with young kids or young athletes there's always a little bit of controversy with it. It's and mainly because you're dealing with parents. And I want to know, one, what piqued your interest in that population? And two, what are some of the big hurdles or drawbacks that you run into in terms of dealing with young athletes?
Great questions. First off, thank you both so much for having me. I'm very blessed to be here because you guys are awesome. You have a great platform. And Mike, it's good to meet you too. I feel super convicted to work with young athletes simply because I was a young athlete at one time, and I did not eat enough. I did not eat enough protein, calcium, vitamin D, some of the most common nutrient deficiencies that we see in not only the female, but the male population. So for me, it's being the person that I needed when I was younger, and that would be more calories, more carbohydrates, the right food at the right time. I was a decent athlete. I think we all would agree. We can talk about our glory days in high school or college, but I did not connect the dots. I was always fascinated with nutrition, but I knew that I wasn't eating enough and I didn't understand the science. So that's why I took it upon myself to get a bachelor's degree in health, nutrition, fitness. It was a health promotion degree with a concentration in strength and conditioning. And then I also got my dietetics degree. And then I went back for my master's after working in corporate wellness. So long story short, I want to correct the deficiencies that I experienced myself, but also empower parents to explore creatine monohydrate, explore some of these supplements that can, take them to the next level, and not just being good, but being great. There's some kids out there right now. It's incredible. I have multi-sport athletes that are, competing for the Olympics in their parents' eyes. So I'm not picking on them, but we have a lot of kids right now that just simply don't know what to eat. And partially to blame is the media, the information out there, or lack thereof, that's credible. So I'm super passionate about that. And if we can teach kids at a young age healthy habits as a human first, they can carry that into adulthood, and then athletic performance, right? A byproduct of eating really well, you tend to be a better athlete, but then adding in that, component of nutrient timing and supplementation. So it's so fun to watch these kids and parents with the light bulbs that click once they connect the dots of creatine is not a steroid. These are things that can make us healthier people, but then better athletes. So that's why I love working with kids. They're not as stubborn as adults. Us adults we're so ignorant. Sometimes we think we know everything, myself included. So kids are pliable, right? We can teach them things. They're willing to try new foods. That's why I love working with kids. Truly, they're willing to try. Adults are so shut off and so narrow-minded sometimes when they get funneled in on this one thing, whether it be keto, carnivore, or fasting. So teaching the kids to avoid some of those just fads and trends that are just cycling through. That was a super long answer. So hopefully that was sufficient for you.
No, that's good. That's good. Mike, what's your story? I mean, you've been in this business a long time. What piqued your interest in it?
It was probably accidental. I went to college, played football, had a 4-year career there on special teams, and that's about as good as I got. A guy in front of me went to the NFL, Joel Williams. So he was a tough, act to follow, but I did my best on the special teams, eventually graduated, eligibility must have run out. And, I was doing construction work. And I was in a community where one of the people there says, we have a position open. First of all, they said, are you a gym teacher? As we were known back at that time. And it was with respect. It wasn't, a slur as people are telling us it is now. And I said, yeah, that's right. They said, well, the high school has a substitute teacher, wrestling coach. Okay, you want to apply. So I went over there after work, and I met the AD and the principal. And within a week, I was hired there. And 38 years later, which students find incredible, why would you want to stay at one school for that long a period of time? I said, I was raised to have loyalty to the people that took care of you, and they kept offering me the contract because of their loyalty to me. So we had a good marriage there. Teaching physical education, they gave me a choice. What do you want to teach? And there was 9 of us in that FIAD department, half female for the most part. And I said, well, if you're asking me, here's what I think I'd like. I'd like to teach freshman FIAD. And at that time, it was not co-ed. There was a boys FIAD class and a women's FIAD class. I said, I'm going to teach the freshman FIAD if you don't mind, because I knew I was going to be the JV wrestling coach and football coach. So now I knew I would have them for 2 years. And then I says, I also have a degree in health education. Can I teach junior health? So now I had them for 3 years. And then the 4th year as seniors, I knew them as well as probably their parents did, and they knew me and my expectations. And we did some damage in the different conferences that we competed with. Now, when I started to understand everything that I learned accidentally for a career that didn't exist, strength and conditioning didn't exist. It was just, as we call now, the scientific foundations and the practical applied principles. Doc Floyd, my guy at lacrosse, would be patient and answer my stupid questions. And as I applied them, championship, till we were winning everything in Wisconsin. There was no championship that our program did not win. And 38 years later, they tell me that after, I think it was 2 years after I left, they had 7 state championships in 1 school year. That to me is pretty darn good. I don't know if there's a lot of other schools that can do that. Going back and asking, I said, are you still following the similar program? They said, yeah, very similar. Again, 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, it's going to equal 4 in Florida. It's going to equal Wendi in Tennessee. It's going to equal 4. Apply the principles, coaches. You're looking for a shortcut. So have I been. I couldn't find it. Okay, you're going to try to bend some rules, break some rules. Kids are going to get hurt. Okay, so one of the slides I had in the presentation, and it was well received. It was like what the physician said: do no harm. I say, coaches, don't hurt our kids. That's somebody's son or daughter, and they're going to come home. You're going to have to take them to the doc and shin splints. My daughter had shin splints, lost her whole junior year because the coach was trying out something new at that time called plyometrics. And geez, they were bouncing them up and down, and both shins were trashed. And when the doctor said, she'll be out, I said, well, 2 weeks. I'm thinking 2 weeks she'll be back. And the guy looked at me, kind of disappointed at me, said, no, she's done for this season. And I didn't get it. That's when I started to realize program design is important. Okay, do I know how to design a program for that particular population? The 14-year-olds through the 19-year-olds.
Confession.
Yeah.
My favorite class was gym class. I'll be honest. I love gym class. I'm sure Tony did too. He's probably like beating kids up in the playground and stuff.
Well, at the time we had some great leaders like Mike, meaning that that's really important. I think that's his plan, to spend the 3 to 4 years with those young students. Outstanding, because that's that's a lifetime change that you get with it when you spend time with an individual like that, through the coaching, through the study. And I was fortunate to have the same. So I think it's great, Mike, you had the vision to have that long-term plan to say, okay, I'm going to coach them, I'm going to teach them, I'm going to have them in 4 grades, I'm going to have them there, I'm going to have them there. And that makes, like I said, indelible impression for a lifetime in a young individual. So that's outstanding, actually.
Yeah, thank you. And at that time, everybody, that's not the plan. You're
Sure.
working, you're doing it. And when I see these students now watching their kids play, I'll go and watch them, play a football game or at a wrestling match. And they'll, coach, do you remember when? And of course I don't, but I'm gonna say, refresh my memory. What did I say that made you smile or got you upset? And it's similar things that my coaches told me. So I think I was fortunate to have good coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to be like my coaches were. And I'm hoping that these students will be, as they thought I was, and go from there.
Outstanding.
I want to
I was gonna ask,
get back.
how was your high school FIAD teacher? Was it somebody you enjoyed? Wendy, was high school
You're
FIAD
asking me?
you enjoyed?
Oh, I loved, by the way, I grew up in Minnesota. So I'm from Southeastern Minnesota. I went to school at UW-Stout, all 3 degrees. So
Right.
UW lacrosse, you guys are our arch nemesis. Just kidding. Just kidding. That's Whitewater. No, I love FIAD. That was the most fun. Like, I was really athletic and I was a tomboy. Still am a tomboy, but I love FIAD. I would get really sweaty and all the other girls would not. They'd sit on the sidelines. I thought our FIAD teacher was awesome. He would call me Irlbeck and he would always throw the football at me really hard and then I'd catch it. So I attribute some of my athleticism to him. So you're making great experiences, clearly, because I remember my FIAD teacher, Mr. Bester.
And they told us that, somebody did the math for me and they said over 10,000 students came and went in that 38-year career.
Wow.
And I'm like, it's a wow, but it'd be like, yike, what did I do to some of them? I'm hoping a good wow and not a yike. And every time my name comes up, now they're like, that guy was a knucklehead. I hope not too many knuckleheads come out of their mouth.
I want to, you had mentioned, there was no such thing as strength and conditioning, and I want to get back to that. But first, we found something similar in nutrition. And I know, Wendy, you've run into this, and obviously I ran into it very early in my career, that from almost a professional point of view, a lot of the health related professions have a weird view of sports nutrition in general, and especially the use of sports supplements in general. And you've run into that. I mean, I've run into it since the last 30 years, but in a weird way, it hasn't changed. And with social media, it's almost amplified. And you're very active on social media. You deal with this almost on a daily basis. It's always like someone, and these are educated people, so it's not like some crackpot is criticizing you. Educated people, for lack of a better words, they say a lot of stupid stuff, and it's sort of, well, how do you deal with that? Because it seems like a constant barrage. So what do you do when you see something said by an MD? There's a lot of MDs on Twitter who will say stuff to you that's, kind of off the wall. How do you approach that?
Yeah, let's just call it what it is. It's total nonsense. And typically what I approach it, number one, I say a prayer because power of prayer, but no, I like to kind of poke fun at it in the sense of like, I throw out the clown emojis, but then provide the science. So That is what I always do is number one, let's get the position stand paper that you amazing folks in the ISSN have published and show the myths, the misconceptions, and debunk them with the data. And that's why I authored a blog in 2020 outlining the available creatine monohydrate papers that Joey, you so kindly shared to me back in, oh goodness, I think it was like 2019. Actually, myself, I mean, I've always been food first, and I learned, and I've always had an open mind, and I've never been, sometimes in the dietetics profession, to say it kindly, they are not open to the available science. They're very outdated with how they approach things. And I was a little bit skeptical myself of the supplementation as far as creatine. So in 2019, Joey sent me some PowerPoints. He provided some great information. I started doing more research. I'm like, yeah, this obviously there's robust research in adults, but there's very scant in the youth population. So I'm not so sure if I want to put my credentials on the line. Of course, I want to get kids to eat food first. They need to build fundamental habits. But even at the end of the day, even if they were eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, snacks in between, we know that they can't consume enough dietary creatine sources to sufficiently increase their intramuscular creatine source. So why wouldn't we supplement something that's safe? There's been 0 reported adverse effects. It has not been harmful, right? It's going to help them. Why wouldn't I recommend it? It would be a disservice. So I changed my approach and I said, hey, I hear you. I know you're very concerned. I'm concerned about your athlete as well. We're all on the same page. We're all on the same team here. We want what's best for the student athlete. And this is what's best, right? This is the science. This is what the outcome is, right? And you're a professional. So whatever your care plan is, it should reflect the goal. So if our goal is to get bigger, faster, stronger, healthier, if you have a beating pulse, like creatine is for you. So a lot of physicians have actually changed their tune. And I actually coach quite a few adult physicians that just want general health and wellness and they want to lose weight. They started using creatine too, because I'm constantly blasting the ISSN position stand papers, making these videos, putting on my clown getup that I got to make fun of it in a sense, because people need to understand that, you know, it's going to help them. Creatine is not a steroid, even with the female population too. I have actually, Joey, everyone on this call, more female athletes that use creatine than males.
That's good.
And I think maybe that's because I'm a female, they identify, they relate with that. But I've experienced more males, like more dads that are more reluctant, and even male physicians. Female physicians and scientists are more willing to hear the information. But I will say collectively, over the last couple of years, more and more people are willing to listen to it. It's the old, outdated, probably 50, well, I'm not going to say outdated, but those that have been practicing medicine for a very long time that are kind of done learning, which is a terrible place to be. They aren't even willing to read the paper. Even if you send it to them, you give them a 90-second video from Dr. Scott Forbes or Darren Candow, they won't even listen to it. That you can't work with that, right? At that point, they are shut down. So we just leave it and we just continue to work with the population that is willing to receive that information because they get better, right?
You know, what's funny is those voiceovers you do with the clown thing. Oddly enough, that a lot of people will listen to it mainly because, well, one, it's kind of funny. It's like, and I don't even know where you get these voices. Like, where do you, I mean, how do you find these they're like perfect lines. And I'm thinking, well, no, I kind of want to do that, but no, Wendi does it better. So, you know, I'll just let Wendi do. She does such a good job.
It's funny. It's just funny you bring this up. I mean, I am who I am. I'm a professional, but people also identify with humor, right? And you know, Jesus Christ himself had a sense of humor. So they are Joe Biden. They are the president of the United States. I'll just say it blankly. I find it funny when, say, maybe I stumbled up the stairs, or I was stuttering when I was in speech class in high school. I find it funny. I can laugh at myself. Other people may find it offensive. I can't control other people's emotions, but I think that it's a way to provide humor, right? Satire, comedy, because some people are very, they just don't like science. It's boring to them. So if we can make it fun and we can draw in a new crowd to listen to that, and it benefits the student athlete, the parents, and why not?
No, humor is a great teacher, right, Tony?
Particularly for the, you know, with the youth population. So I think it's great.
You know, Mike, going back to the 80s, I think, I used to go to my go-to conference as a young I was a biology major, was the American College of Sports Medicine. And just a quick story. going to ACSM, this is in the 80s and it trickled into the 90s a little. There was one message. It was this: aerobic exercise is the only thing you need to do. Lifting weights, no one needs to lift weights. That was the zeitgeist of the time. It sounds weird today. It's like, really? Like, yes, this is ACSM, 1980s, trickled into the 1990s. That's what pushed me to the NSCA. I'm thinking, these guys give much better advice when it comes to training, especially lifting weights. The folks at ACSM, they viewed the NSCA, and you'll understand this analogy, Wendi, because it applies to sports nutrition. The folks at ACSM said this, and I remember I was like, what is wrong with these people? They said, oh, those people at the NSCA, they're just meatheads who lift weights. They don't know anything about training. I'm thinking, wow, it's just crazy how this stuff repeats itself historically, where if a new idea comes along, the people who are, I guess, in lack of better terms, in power, they'll ridicule it. And then eventually they'll accept it because they're like, okay, you know what? Resistance training is actually good for you. So now we're on the bandwagon. How did you saw the evolution of it, because you started out in the 1980s and up to now? Strength and conditioning is completely different. So tell the audience a little bit about that experience.
My first experience up at lacrosse, we had a 400-pound Olympic set, and we squatted, we bench pressed, and we deadlift. We were not allowed to do Olympic lifting movements because one guy got hurt, and the football coach says, forget about it. Nobody will do any Olympic lifting movements. So we didn't. And, incredibly strong. Okay. And that was our type of sport, 3 1/3, 3 1/3, 3 1/3, hold the ball, run the clock out, and just, smash mouth football type of deal. The other tool we had was something called the universal variable resistance machine.
I remember that.
Not too many will.
That's before your time, Wendi.
I have to write this down. What is it?
It was
The universal
variable resistance machine. And Wendi, it was a square box that would fit in usually some abandoned classroom or a custodial closet. And you could get it in school colors. So that was a big deal. And our Phi Ed classes at that time were about 24. So while 12 kids were doing either 15 repetitions or a 30-second workload, the others were writing down their score and recovering. And when the principals walked by, they thought that was the greatest thing in the world. First of all, nobody would get hurt. The machine's not going to fall over on them. And, they loved it. And I would whistle and kids would rotate. And, at the end of a Phi Ed class, a little bit sweaty, a little bit huffing and puffing. And it was, time for the showers. That's where it started. Then, we at that time were allowed to make the equipment. So I would buy, I'm going to make up some numbers now. A piece of equipment may have cost $500, a squat rack, a bench, whatever. And you could buy kits. And we had enough people in this community that would weld, and they would put our kits together. So we had the universal machine. And I think it was at that time, 2 squat racks, 3 benches, and we would deadlift off of the floor. And that's where it all got started. The programs, I just gave a presentation 2 Saturdays ago, and the second slide I showed was blank. And I said, these were my resources in 1985. There was nothing. Okay, nowadays you click on, YouTube, Google, you can find more than you need to know for a beginning strength coach. We kind of were making it up, and we would try stuff, and then we would bounce ideas off of the guys around the country, and they would share what was working for them. And then we decided on the flight home, you think it would work for us? Do we have the coaches to make it work? Would the sport coaches buy in? Would the administrators support it? And, Joe, you said, something about trying new stuff. I am very slow to try new stuff. I'm the old guy that stays inside the box. This concept, think outside the box. I will think outside the box after you 3 have tested it and show me that it works. Then now you got my interest. But I mean, we needed to get strong before we would get powerful, and we would get fast in all directions. Initially, our speed at that school was 5.2. That was Muskego fast. Now they're running 4.7s. Okay, and again, that's 46 years later, though. So when I talk to the 22-year-olds, coach, I want to get what you got. 10,000 square foot weight room, blah blah blah. I said, come and see me in 46 years and let me know how it went. Okay, so it was whatever the trends were, I bucked them, and I stayed with squats, benches, deadlifts, and the Olympic movements. I had to hire the guys from the Olympic Training Center 3 summers in a row to come on over to our school and then work on our staff. And, something as simple as getting those elbows out, I wasn't getting it. We were doing giant reverse curls. And finally, that 3rd year, whatever, Lynn Jones, the head guy at the time, said, "Coach, I think you got it." And I said, "Why didn't I get it 2 years ago?" And he had no excuse. So now when I'm working with freshmen, why aren't they getting it first hour? Okay, their freshman year, they may not get it for 3-4 years. I have them. Okay, Anthony, you talked about the patience. A high school phys ed teacher learns patience.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't expect big gains in a short period of time.
Tony, do you have a comment?
No, it's regarding the Olympic lifting and the origin. I mean, I remember watching the transition myself that you spoke to. And in essence, we were kind of pioneers. I mean, I got my CSCS shortly after you, Mike, and I think it was me, Ben Franklin took it. But and by the way, Ben Franklin did not pass the first time. History is incorrect. He had to take the CSCS twice. But nevertheless, we were experimenting. We had some influence, some, occasional Russian influence, right? Some of the papers were coming over on how we should train. But to your point about resistance training and the ACSM, who I think historically had a big influence on that, because I lived in Texas at the time, and Dr. Kenneth Cooper was very much against resistance training to about 1988. Right. And then he changed his position on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, but I think that highly influenced the NSCA, I'm sorry, the ACSM as well. Am I correct?
Yeah, because remember, he wrote that book. I don't know if you remember the book Aerobics. Wendi, it's a classic.
Yeah.
It was written like probably 30 years before you were born or something, but it is
at a garage sale. I think I saw it one time by Jillian Michaels' book. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. It was a joke.
Well, here's the thing. If you get the book Aerobics, I mean, it's a little paperback.
Yeah.
When he wrote it, when he wrote it at the time, this is in the 60s, he was a physician who worked in the military. Back then, aerobic training was considered a way to kill someone. It's like, oh my God, your heart, you only have so many heartbeats. And if you train aerobically, so in a way, he dealt with the aerobics end of it. The NSCA dealt with the resistance training end of it. And it's absolutely true, Mike, that the basics work. And I want to transition this over to Wendi, because when we talk about sports nutrition and supplementation and working with kids, sometimes people don't like the basics because they're like, well, is that all you want me to do? And well, if you can't do the basics, why would you want to do the complex stuff? How do you approach that when people are like, wait, so I just got to eat this stuff and I'll be a lot better? Well, it would help if you eat the way I tell you to eat. So what do you think, Wendi?
Oh my goodness. First off, I had no idea. We've come a really long way. We've come a long way. I'm so grateful for all of you guys and everything you're sharing, because I'm learning here too. As far as the basics, obviously the basics work, especially when they're consistently done. The strength training, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, drinking 100+ ounces of water, and eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner with snacks in between. Those are literally the things that we spend 65% of our time on in that first session, whether it be a consult or a presentation. It's the nutrition 101. And, I get the questions of like, yeah, but what protein powder should I use? I was like, well, are you eating breakfast?
Right.
No. Okay, well, let's start there. And then I'm happy to answer your protein question, because yes, protein is very important. And I'm like the protein queen. I love protein. And I think that whey protein is a fantastic option to supplement the gaps in your nutrition. But you don't even have a nutrition right now because you eat maybe 1.5 meals per day. You have a half a sandwich at lunch. Maybe you have some pretzels and chips 4 hours later, and then you go into a training session for 2 hours and you're gassed, and then you get injured and you're asking about protein powder. So I kind of put it in the category of like, these are why it's, the basics are important. This is why. And the consequences of not eating fundamental meals are that you're not going to get bigger, faster, stronger. You're going to get injured. You're going to get sick. You're going to get poor grades. And Mike knows this too. I mean, working with kids, they want it now. I mean, we all, even adults, we want it now. So when you tell them that these are the consistent things you need to do over time, you need to eat half your plate carbohydrates, you need to have some protein and carbs around your workouts. Let's start there and be consistent with that. You're going to get better results versus trying to do some crazy intense meal plan that everybody thinks they need when they just need to get back to the basics. So how I simply approach that is asking them those questions, and when they can't, answer in the ways that they know that they should, it puts them in a position that, yeah, I've got to make some changes here. I've got to start packing an actual snack, and I can, grab a banana and some peanut butter. I can do the hard-boiled eggs. And then they find that protein powder too. I mean, oh, this is going to be a more cost-effective way. Because a lot of parents, kind of cool, some of the parents are saying, all right, Johnny, if you want to use the protein powder, you're going to have to buy it on your own, but I'll buy you real food. So if the parent forces the kid to buy the protein powder, they're more likely to then eat the food at home because they don't have the cash. So I have a lot of different tactics that I've learned over the years working with some of these parents. And just simply put, once they start doing those consistent things, they start to see the gains. They feel the gains in the weight room. They run faster. And even the female athletes too. The biggest thing is that they think that they should be consuming smoothies or a salad to stay lean and fast. And you can't eat like a bird and race like a beast. And they learn that quickly once they start eating more. So it just the byproduct of, the basics is you just become a better, healthier athlete.
Do the women you work with or the young girls you work with, do they ever worry about, particularly when you talk about protein, do they say, I don't want to get big?
Yes. Try not to, I used to be one of them when I was little. I mean, I didn't know I was eating a lot of carbs. So yes, it's not just about getting big, but it's about gaining weight. And it's even a concern for a lot of the men too, because we work with all athletes, but they don't want to feel heavy from a digestion standpoint. It's not necessarily big that they'll say, it's more, I don't want to feel heavy on the field. I don't want to feel full when I go to a training session. I want to be fast. And meat slows me down. So these are some of the comments that are made. So I'm happy to dispel some of these. And, hearing them, I understand you may feel that way, but maybe it's the fact that you consumed too large of a meal. So what if we did a smaller portion, maybe doing 2 to 3 ounces of a flank steak versus 7 ounces, you might feel differently about it. So that is a common concern of a lot of females. But again, there's always, they sit in front of me, we're private practice. So they're there because they want to make changes. I don't work in the clinic or hospital where people are forced to see me. So typically they're in that state of change. But I will, on social media, I've had a lot of cross-country soccer athletes that are not working with us that will ask me questions about, I feel too full, or I don't want to get fat. I'm really concerned about, eating too much meat or the carbs, things like that. So it's just the same nuances that you guys have been dealing with for years. So they're just perpetuating. So it's, it takes a village. I'm sure you've experienced that too, Mike. Do you ever get questions like that in the weight room?
Yes. And, as you're going over your list, I'm thinking, how many times have I had students come up to me, knock on my door, say, Coach, I'm hungry.
Mm-hmm.
I would always then, not always, but I would start to figure out, especially the wrestlers, I would have some jerky, I would have some granola bars, I would have some chocolate milk. I had the biggest thing of peanut butter that I could find, and they would just take a clean spoon, take a scoop, and go on to their next class. My point I was going to follow up with, it's not only were they hungry, but in our community, there were several students that says, Coach, they took our knowledge test, nutritional knowledge test, and they did well. We don't have the money, okay, to have all the stuff that, you're talking about in health class. And that made me scratch my head and go over to the lunch lady. And I said, how can we work on this? I said, give me a dozen lunch tickets. And if kids heard, they knock on my door, Coach, can I get a ticket from you today? And they would sweep the weight room. They would organize weights or sometimes nothing, but I wouldn't give it to them for free. They would have to earn that ticket. And, I'd buy a dozen, and all of a sudden, son of a gun, 15 were in the pack. And the lunch lady, she'd come waddling in, big old smile on her face. She knew what I was trying to do, and she supported that. Okay. So again, people are good, even the knuckleheads are good if they know the cause is good. So coaches, high school coaches who are reading this, who do you have to see to get that kid, some kind of breakfast, some kind of lunch, some kind of snack? They were so good that when we travel for wrestling, the wrestlers would come in, they do their weigh-in. I would look in their bags to see what they had, Twinkies, okay, all the stuff that I'm like, oh gosh, this is not going to help us in the long run. So I said to the lady, can you make us a lunch for about $1.50, $2? And then I would get either out of my pocket initially or boosters to put together a nice lunch based on what our And I don't think they were dietitians, Wendy. I think they were just good people who had a clue on how to put some sandwiches together. Would that make sense?
So yeah, so here's something, you bring up a lot of great things. I love what you did there. That's amazing. And then making them earn it too. That's important because kids now are very entitled. But so there's actually quite a few registered dietitians that are food service directors. Back then, they probably had a master's or maybe a bachelor's in something, but typically nowadays in food service, they are registered dietitians because they have to, make all the recommendations and the guidelines, work with sodium and carbohydrates and protein. I challenged some of it, but I saw it too in my internship. A lot of schools too are doing performance packs where we're actually getting, the chocolate milk, the banana, things you're talking about. They're putting that together. And that's coming from booster funds, or it's coming from parents, or there's so many strength coaches that I've worked with on fueling stations that they just funded the whole thing. So what you've done is really terrific, and you built a great relationship with those. They hate being called lunch ladies. I'll just say that because when I was in my rotations, they're like, if another person calls me a lunch lady, I'm gonna snap. And I was like,
to call them? How should we address them?
by their, I joke, by their name. No, most of them are, just if they're a food service director or if they are a food service attendant. Every school is different. I did my food service rotation in a very wealthy community in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I won't disclose the community, but they want to be called not lunch lady or dietary, their name, or if they are a dietitian, which most are. They had 6 dietitians where I was at. It was a very wealthy community, but yes. So, but you're awesome, Mike. So I'm sure they're like, it's fine. But yeah, people they really hate that being called a lunch lady. They despise that.
We didn't have dietitians when we were young. I assure you of that. Not when we were.
Know. You would know, Tony, and you of all people, you're like the nicest person too. But yeah, I mean, they just, So just side note, that's great. They'll keep going, keep expressing what you're talking about with the booster club there.
It must have been working. Once we start to get them, I use body fats to get them in the right weight class. That was new in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you just take, a football player and say, I need you at 220, and the kid weighed 240. It didn't matter. I need you at, 220 Thursday night. And they'd sweat it out. They'd starve. They'd do whatever. My worst story is I had a very good wrestler. A mom approached me and said, Coach, you got to talk to him. I said, what's up? He says, here's what he eats all day: 12 Cheerios in water.
Wow.
He picks one with a spoon, and he'll chew it to death. And he'll eat that second one. And this kid could come on Thursday nights and just tear people apart. I started getting to know a little bit about this and asking the right questions. And, we bumped him up to a weight class, and he even got better still. But, parents want to congratulate them, with Dairy Queen little ice cream sandwiches. And this one kid was really struggling. And I saw the dad come across the gym with a DQ bag. And I kind of headed off to him, and I met him at the same time he met his son. He gave his son that ice cream. I said, hey, I'll take that. And I opened it up, and I was talking to dad saying, did you know that your son has trouble making weight, to a point where I found him on the stairwell, almost unconscious. And I started eating his ice cream in front of the kid. Is horrified. The dad didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I said, here's the deal. Okay, we have to get him on a plan. I suggest we bump him up a weight class. And I think that might solve some of the things. Our program in duels, we weren't beat for 10 years. Okay, so you're coming from Minnesota, Wendy. Your state is good in wrestling, high school wrestling.
Very good. Yeah, they're really good.
Locally. And I was looking for people to beat, and people say, how do you do that? And again, I didn't know. I was applying basics. I was starting to learn a little bit about nutrition. I'm not the guy that says, I got to know it all. I would reach out to people like you, Wendy, and say, help me. Okay, how can I get this kid to the right weight class? And I can't remember his name, Joey, but he was the guy that did the first research in Iowa about body weights and getting them in the right weight classes. And as soon as you say his name, I'll say, that's him. I met him accidentally at lunch. And I was telling him, yeah, you're a wrestling coach, I hear. Yeah. And anything new? I said, yeah, we're doing something new in Wisconsin. We're doing body fats. And all of a sudden you could see he started getting interested. And he says, that's my work. And just like,
yeah, the name's not ringing a bell. Wendy,
I feel like I read an article with that name. I'll look it up after, because I feel like Dr. Andrew Jagum knows who that is, because we talked about something. I had some wrestlers a couple of years ago I was struggling with. So the
Yeah,
name.
in Iowa of all places. Like, yeah, when do you deal with issues of body weight and body composition? And I think,
Yes.
how do you approach it when most people really aren't familiar with body composition per se? All they do, we're all familiar with you step on the scale and that's the number you
Mhm.
get. How do you
Mhm.
educate clients, particularly young clients, in terms of the importance of composition versus just pure weight?
Great question. So like Mike had brought it up a little bit too. I've actually had quite a few parents and coaches, like when they come to me, they're like, my kid's fat. This is their words. My kid's fat, he needs to lose weight. Or my girl is heavy, she needs to, lean out or whatever. So obviously I ask a ton of questions, want to, assess for any red flags, if there's some disordered eating, their relationship with food. That's how I start as a practitioner to approach that. But I also want people to understand, and I've made some videos about this too, that calories affect our body weight. The content of those calories affect our body composition. So if you want to eat in a calorie deficit, we all know this, like people out there that are listening to this, though, even coaches too, they just don't know this, but yes, we could eat Twinkies. And if we were in a calorie deficit, we would jump on the scale. And if we were in a deficit, we would lose weight, but we would also likely lose lean mass, which is not good. We want to maintain that lean mass to protect our bone mineral density, obviously long-term health, longevity, etc. But folks need to understand that if you're not eating enough protein, you're not going to recover post-training to actually repair what you've broken down, and also to maintain that lean mass, and then fighting off age-related muscle loss as we age past 30, 40, etc. So parents out there will sometimes just say to me too, well, my kid, he's eating, in a calorie surplus. I'm pretty sure of it. It's like, well, how do we know that? What gets measured is managed. So are you tracking? Are you journaling? Have you done a DEXA scan? I have a great person here, Transformation Lab here in Nashville, that I can refer my clients and athletes to. Figure skaters, number one, too. It's just like wrestlers, they are told to make a certain weight sometimes. And it's not exactly the same, but I would say let's get a DEXA done so we can actually see what their body composition is. How much body fat are they carrying? How much lean mass do they have? Let's take a look at that, because you can't just, you just don't know. The scale is a terrible indicator for health, wellness. It doesn't tell us anything about our triglycerides, our cholesterol levels. It doesn't tell us about our body fat, how much water we're holding, which is pretty important to wrestlers. And I get tangential with it, but even really smart people, like you said, Joey, like they still don't understand this. And there's so many people that are brilliant that are arguing about, demonizing protein of all things, which even the position stand paper that you have published in the ISSN, I think it was 3 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. There was no harm, but it helped them maintain their body weight eating in a calorie deficit. So that's why I err on the side of eating higher protein, and we would reduce the carbohydrates, put them around the training when they're most active to use those carbs, and then just, eat fat and protein outside of the inactive times to increase that body composition. So got a little tangential. I'm very excited about it. And that's what I'm speaking about at the conference in a couple months. I got to probably start writing that presentation, huh?
And I do want to mention that conference, which Wendi will be at. Tony will be there as well. I wish Mike could go. It is the 20th annual ISSN conference. It is June 15 to 17. Fort Lauderdale Beach. Even if you don't like the conference, the beach is beautiful. You can always go swimming with the sharks, things like that. We have about not quite 15 minutes left, so I wanted to address this because this is probably one of the most common questions about kids. When can my kid? Well, there's two parts. Is it safe for my kid to lift weights? And when should they start lifting weights if it is safe? First, you, Mike, and then Wendi. I want your thoughts on it.
As we talked about before the show began, they can start training as soon as they start competing. So if there are little kids playing football, little kids playing soccer, little kids start to swim, whatever your area is big into, some sort of training modalities, so the student understands that this causes that to happen. The dangers, the myths, okay, they're still, you're going to affect the growth plates. And there's going to be some issue with that. Wendi, women, I had 2 daughters, Dad, I don't want to get too big. They were both throwers. I wanted them to get big. They didn't want to get big. They wanted to be the good looking, thinner thrower. And I was like, here's your strength is going to generate the power. That's a whole nother story I'd share with you at another time. Joey, it's qualified. Who's a qualified person that's going to be in the weight room with that student? Is it going to be the dad? Dads, I'm going to bond with my son, with my daughter. How do I argue that? Okay, dad, you don't know what you're doing though. I've had that discussion many times. May I suggest a program? Okay, what do you have? Tell me what you have. I'll suggest a program based on your daughter, son's goals, based on the equipment you have. I'll put it in order for you, and I'll follow up if that's what you want. And they're somewhat appreciative of that. But the big word, and I'm hearing it now starting to be used more often, is who is qualified to be in a weight room. Okay, for a while there, we didn't want to address that because everybody thinks, hey, look at me, I've got big arms, look at me, I played a sport, look at me, whatever, I can go in a weight room and I can design a program. And boy, it's not that simple, as I found out.
Wendi?
So well said. It's funny because I just had this conversation like 15 times in the last couple of weeks. So I made a video about it, so you can go check that out. But I shared some of the research showing that females and males that actually resistance trained between the ages of 9 and 12 years old, they had less knee injuries, they had less ACL tears. And the statistics on ACL injuries right now are just ridiculous. So when I see the data and I share that with the parent, they're like, oh yeah, okay, it's not scary. But the growth place, I laughed because that was literally one of the parents' arguments, because she said she saw something and wanted to ask about it. So I shared the science with her, and I just said, here's the deal. If you want your athlete to move well the rest of their life, you want them to strength train, because the more muscle they have, the lower risk of injury. And if you can teach them to move well, they'll move well the rest of their life. So I really like what Mike said too. I mean, just getting them in there with a qualified personnel. That's the thing, is that there's a lot of unqualified people, doctors, dietitians, etc., that are not qualified, and they are doing harm. And then it gives the entire population of professionals a bad rep, which we got to, try and correct that. But I would say that if we look at the science and all the great data that's published, that, young kids, youth athletes lifting weights, playing multiple sports, they have better motor skills, better agility, they're faster, they're stronger, less likely to be injured. Those are all the important modalities, right? Injury prevention should always be number one. So get someone that's qualified in a weight room, and obviously, start slow too, and don't add load too quick. I mean, I'm not as qualified as Mike is, but those fundamental things are often not even looked at. People just say, all right, go in there and deadlift 150 pounds, and it's some 12-year-old, and that is dangerous. So that is, I don't know, I'm really fired up about that, because being a female, I can't tell you, it's so hard for us to put on lean mass. We produce way less testosterone. I wish I could just go pick up a weight and add mass. I've been lifting for a consistent decade, and it's so hard for me, even myself, to work and maintain this lean mass. And, females saying, I don't want to get too big. I know you won't. So you don't have to worry about that. But it would actually we'd actually have healthier body compositions if we did lift weights, right? More muscle burns more fat. So I have so many things on that. But Mike, you're an expert. I had no idea that you had been so qualified in the field for, nutrition too. You're talking about a lot of different things. So
nutrition, again, as a health teacher, what did I have? Maybe 4 or 5 lessons on that. So basically, it was what the school district had as far as a textbook and pamphlets. But I was, I think, smart enough to defer to professors at local universities and invite them as guest speakers, and they were well received. Okay, so again, if there's something that I don't know or don't feel comfortable teaching, I'll get somebody that I feel is and will relate well to the students. We talked about the not be qualified. Sometimes some of you PhDs are too bright and you forget who your population is. And
practical applications, right?
You don't speak high school coach. You don't speak, a sport coach. You know your dots and your charts and your everything else. We need to start learning how to speak. There's got to be a class in that. How do you talk to this mom or dad?
Yeah, I like my dots and charts, Mike. Come on.
You guys crack
They're
me up.
helpful.
Every time I sit there, I'm like, oh, guys, I'm going to have to think and figure out what that dot means. Where's it going?
But you bring up, Mike, you bring up such a great point though, too. And I think, I'm so grateful. I mean, I love the sports science. I picked up, I have it on my bookshelf over here. the sports nutrition and supplementation book that Dr. Abby Smith, Ryan, and Joey, they published. And I was like envious, like these are so smart. They're amazing people. Like, I hope I get to meet them someday. And that was in 2015, because I was like the black sheep in my dietetics program at Stout, because everybody was clinical and no one wanted to look at supplementation. And long story short, the point is I picked up that book and it was like amazing, because there's all these great, like, studies and all the science, and it's great. But at the same time, like, I have to then regurgitate this information in practical terms that make sense, so that if I do talk to a sport coach, I talk to a parent, I talk to an athlete, they're going to understand carbohydrates. They don't need to know glycogen. They don't need to understand the metabolic pathways. They just need to know eat protein and carbs before and after training. Okay, got it. Repair, all those things. So I think that everybody plays their role. And if we all work collaboratively explaining this, great scientists give us the information, we read it, us muggles, we make sense of it, we share it, disseminate it via videos or however, and then everybody benefits as a team, right?
Right. You use the word collaborate, and it doesn't seem like in our profession, we have a profession and then we have an industry, and the people in the industry are selling stuff, and the people in the profession are trying to educate people. So when we can close that gap, I think we can do some good damage in the athletic world. Until then, it's like I don't try to take any money out of anybody's pocket, and support me on what I'm trying to do. Okay, it's like go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say we're running out of time, and I know Wendy, you have a client to go to, so I'd like to end it with this. Wendy, you talked about the importance of macronutrients and nutrient timing and whatnot. I'm sure a common question would be, and address this super quick, the top 5 supplements that you would recommend in general for performance. And obviously creatine is one. So what would be 4 others that in general you would recommend?
Vitamin D, zinc, fish oil, beta alanine. That's hard. Can I do like 7 or 10?
Yes.
Caffeine, because it depends. I don't want my young, 12-year-old athletes doing caffeine, but yes, caffeine is obviously one of the best ergogenic aids. So yes, creatine, caffeine, vitamin D, zinc, fish oil, beta alanine. Also would recommend in certain situations, magnesium. Those are going to be my go-tos.
No, that's actually a good point, and we'll get to you, Mike, but I didn't realize a lot of people are deficient in magnesium intake. When I looked at the literature, I was actually kind of surprised. So that's a good one. Most people don't mention that.
Well, okay, we have enough time because this is important. I want to be able to explain this because I've run into this a lot with clients and young and old, but with leaky gut and all the just people not drinking enough water, the stress, athletes too, they're training at a high level, just the amount of load too within the gut from a digestion absorption situation. There's a lot of people with leaky gut. There's a lot of people abusing artificial sweeteners. So magnesium has actually been part of our gut protocol and increasing that because people are also not eating enough, nuts and seeds. So we've been recommending, getting closer. You have to start slow when you recommend magnesium because otherwise people will have a lot of bloating and some diarrhea. So getting folks to a minimum of 300 to 500 milligrams and then getting them closer to 800, we're actually helping them to have less muscle cramps. They're sleeping better too. Magnesium and zinc, like zinc is for wound healing as well, but magnesium before bed has actually helped a lot of our athletes feel more calm, help them get better sleep. It's also improved their gut. And what's really cool about the gut health aspect as well, factoring in vitamin D too, is actually when they go get some of their labs drawn and the testing, because tests don't guess, we're seeing improvement. So and their symptoms are going away, the gas, the bloating, the fatigue, because most people they have no idea, right? So unless we test for, vitamin D, magnesium, we just don't know. So I would say anyone that's listening to this, check your magnesium intake. I have some posts on what magnesium rich foods are. Go look at that on Instagram. But then also make sure that you're getting that additional supplementation if you are an athlete. It's not going to hurt you. There's also something too, I had some arguments with some physicians about vitamin D toxicity. When I did my thesis on my master's vitamin D and muscle cell receptor function in 2016, 2/3 of the world's population was vitamin D deficient. Okay. And that's dramatically increased. People are not eating eggs. People aren't getting outside. We're not seeing the sun in the Midwest. So I just can't say enough about those supplements because those would correct a lot of ailments that a lot of folks have, like depression. Well, I shouldn't say correct, would help mitigate some of the symptoms of depression, fatigue, brain fog, injuries, illness. So highly recommend those supplements. And yes, I would put my credentials on the line for them because it's in the science.
That's great advice. And
Love
Mike,
it.
your most important resistance training exercises.
I like squats.
Squats.
I'll live and die with squats. From there, I can branch up and do a variety of other exercises.
So squat is the king of all resistance training exercises.
So some people think, and then recently there's a couple people that are saying, they'll never squat, they're athletes, and I'm like, that's fine.
That's
No,
crazy.
I want to say, here is what I have been doing. Now you can go and research it to death, and then tell me, maybe I'm right, or no, definitely I'm wrong, and that's fine. At age 70, it doesn't matter too much what other people are thinking. I know what has worked, and I know what we have done with our athletes.
Thank you, Mike. Hey, Wendy, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter, very active, nutritionwithwendy.com. That's our website. We do presentations, we do coaching for both collegiate, youth, masters athletes. I just had an athlete run the Boston Marathon. He did awesome. So I'm so grateful for all of your time today. Before I forget, Mike, my dad, so he owns a trucking business and he's a crop farmer in southeastern Minnesota. He has an awesome mustache and he's had that mustache since high school. He used to scare all my guy friends in high school. And I'm sharing this because you have an awesome mustache and my dad would think your mustache is awesome. So you have an awesome mustache.
Thank you. It made my day.
That's
So
a
we like
big,
to have fun.
it's from the Big Ten, the Big Ten mustache, Minnesota,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Iowa.
Well, hey, I want to thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Mike. Tony, thank you it was a great show. We'll
Really
have this
good.
posted
Thank you so
ASAP.
much.
Hey, you guys have a great day.
Thank you.